Good morning, everyone. Happy Monday and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Monday, the 20th of May. I've got a full team this morning. First of all, Joshua Barry. How are we doing, Joshua?
Yep, all good. Derek was at the football writers' dinner last night, but an early one for me, so should be fresh for the morning briefing. Let's see how we go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Johnny McFarlane also joins us from Rangers Review HQ. How's it going, Johnny?
Good. I've got this very silly set of headphones on, so you can hear me clearly. I don't mind looking daft for our listeners and viewers.
Yeah, it looks like you're about to sell some quality insurance products. Yeah. We're here to talk all things Rangers. Before we do that, just a quick word for our podcast sponsors, MPH Boilers. They've got these brilliant Viessmann Boilers on offer. You know the drill by now, folks. The all-important links are in the description below. You get those flexible finance options that are available. First year interest-free. And they also throw in a free internet controller as well. So if your boiler is on the blink, then these are the guys to call. Right, Joshua, you were in attendance at Tynecastle for us on Saturday, a game that pretty much encapsulated Rangers' season, if you like, going behind to a Lawrence Shankland goal. Just a simple ball in behind Rangers' defence again, not for the first time. It's fair to say sixes and sevens. They replied, though, Rangers, and they responded in a positive manner in the second half. Ross McCausland with an absolute beauty, followed by Todd Cantwell with a similar impressive goal. Fabio Silva then netted, showing good anticipation in the Hearts penalty area. And Rangers were pretty much home and hosed, you would like to have thought. However, there was some more nonsense on the way. Hearts grabbing two goals in reply. Their second goal, James Tavernier again, not covering himself in glory. Another poor goal to lose. Defensively, Hearts equalising pretty much with the last kick of the ball. Good finish, it's fair to say, but it ended 3 apiece at Tynecastle. Rangers finishing the season 8 points behind Celtic. A really poor end to the campaign, Joshua, and doesn't bode well for me heading into the game on Saturday.
No, it was not a game to really build optimism ahead of a cup final. I think you're right, Derek. Chris and I spoke about it briefly after the game on Saturday. It really encapsulates Rangers' season because you've got a slow start and a pretty complacent start. You don't really see them start playing until they're 1 goal down. There's a couple of really bad misses in there, one in particular from Cyril Dessers, which has been a feature of parts of the season, undoubtedly. Rangers then do play some good stuff and get themselves into a really good position. And much like the game against Dundee, I think for the 20-30 minutes after half-time, again, in line with what Clement had said at his press conference after the Dundee game, he really criticised the players for not finding it within themselves to catalyse a performance, but having to wait until half-time again to do so, get themselves into a good position. And then again, there's the complacency and they drop points. And obviously in the context of the season, it doesn't really matter because Celtic had already won the title. But you're right, Derek, you fall further behind in terms of the end of season rankings. You don't win in the lead up to the Scottish Cup final. And it's another game, much like the Dundee game, which I think throws up as many, if not more questions than answers for Rangers and Clement heading into this game. I'm sure ideally he wouldn't want to concede 5 goals across those 2 games heading to Hampden. So a game where we didn't learn that much new. It reinforced the issues of this season. We've spoken about it previously, Derek, but I think if you go all the way back to that Ross County game where Rangers dropped points and you compare it to the comments that Clement made last week, the real undertone of what he was saying after the Dundee game was there is a complacency at points which sets in. And he obviously can't fix that during a game while the game is on. He can only really fix that at half-time. If you go back to the Ross County game, though, Rangers were 1-0 up. Their title race, their title challenge still very much looked like it was on. They'd got through that Old Firm game at home where, again, they'd started really slowly and put themselves into a difficult position. I think from that point, from the start of that second half where they went 2-1 down, you can trace it right back to the Motherwell game as well. But they've never been able to recover. And their form in March, April and May is not been nearly deserving of a league title, and that's why they end the season 8 points behind instead of a much better position, which looked like it might be the case a couple of months ago.
Johnny, Brian with a point here says Hearts game was a nothing game, wouldn't be reading too much into it. Has he got a point there? I mean, every Rangers game that the Rangers play, you'd be expecting them to win domestically at least, and to be 3-1 up in that game it's only natural that you're aggrieved and disappointed not to win it and finish, as we heard from Ross McCausland prior to the game in his press conference. They wanted to finish on a high with 2 victories. I mean, defensively, as I touched on there, Rangers suspect once again. What did you make of it all? Does he have a point here, Brian, do you think?
Yeah, I think he does in some regards, but we can only make judgment calls as pundits based on what we see. And fundamentally, what we saw was pretty unimpressive, and what we've been seeing for quite a long time has been pretty unimpressive. And there's very, very little evidence to be showcasing the idea that Rangers can go and win that cup final. I think I probably would be very pessimistic about Rangers' chances. I got a lot of criticism for coming on here last Monday, Derek, or the Monday before, and talking about how pessimistic I was about Rangers' chances going to Parkhead. And fundamentally, that wasn't because I'm a pessimistic person. It's just because I didn't see any evidence to suggest that Rangers were in a position where they could turn it round. So I can understand the negativity. It's more terrible defending. One of the things that was doing the rounds on social media I thought was really interesting was it was a table from the Scottish Premiership over the last 10 games. I think Rangers were something like 5th. Yes. And to go from, by a margin, having the best defensive record in the league to being behind Celtic by 2 goals. Celtic, I think, conceded 30, Rangers 32. And there was a time there's a big difference between the 2 teams in terms of goals. It just underlines that something's going haywire, something's going badly wrong in these last few games of the season. That's the second time in recent times that Rangers have conceded 3 goals. You know, the 3-3 draw with Celtic, a 3-3 draw now with Hearts. And it speaks to a soft core and the team not sticking to the principles of Philippe Clement off the ball. Because when we came in, one of the first things that was very obvious and pronounced was that this side were looking like they were coached in the training field, looking like they were sticking to what they were being asked, because suddenly, after the slight chaos of the end of Michael Beale's era, once again, Rangers looked like a solid unit with a shape, and that's disappeared. And you can hear it because the manager's coming out and talking about off-the-ball shape. One of the biggest, I think, culprits of that's been James Tavernier over the last few games. He's really been really, really bad indeed. So, again, to answer the question, no, I don't think it's I don't think it's untoward to say it's part of the evidence that suggests that things are going to go pretty badly wrong at Hampden once again. But you also have to caveat it by saying, well, look, you've seen strange things happen in these kind of games before. And we all remember the Hibs 5, Rangers 5 game. You know, these dead rubbers at the end of the season where no one wants injured can be a little bit more high scoring and a little bit less testy than normal. But I just think it plays into this larger body of evidence that Rangers somehow have just come off the rails. I don't really understand why. I don't really understand beyond the injuries. It seems a bit more profound than that, Derek. They're not doing the basics all of a sudden. A lot of fans will be watching this and going, well, this is just what they do. This is what a lot of these players do. And this is why, fundamentally, there needs to be a massive change in that. My understanding from speaking to people at the club, Derek, is that we are going to see a profound change in the summer. There's going to be a complete wiping of the boards. And I think even some of the people that you might not expect to go could go. I think Rangers are looking at it very much like we need to change up the culture, we need to change up the dressing room, we need to bring in players with physicality, players with speed, players who are hungry, players who are wanting to better themselves and improve their careers. My hope is that also includes some Scottish players, because Rangers need a Scottish core, and that's my biggest concern, that a load of these project players come in, which, you know, Rangers need project players, but they also need players that understand the club and understand the culture. And if you don't do that, you're going to have big difficulties. So I'd expect to see some of the players that are out of contract, some of the players in the league currently that are amongst the better players, being linked pretty heavily with a move to Ibrox in the coming weeks.
Yeah, just that 10 games, Rangers 4th, Celtic with 25 points from the last 10, Hearts with 16, as do Kilmarnock from the last 10 games, Rangers 4th with just 15 points from the previous 10 matches, which tells you everything you need to know. That's coming off the rails for me, Joshua, is it not?
Oh, 100%. But the reasons as to why, which Johnny's alluding to there, is that it was up until February. It was February 28th, wasn't it? Where Rangers beat Kilmarnock away from home. They'd just beaten Hearts at home. They'd won 18 of their first 20 games under Clement. They'd won a trophy. They topped the Europa League group. And all at that moment, he could have hardly done much better. Should have probably beaten Aberdeen away. Was a bit unfortunate on that day. And I think the Old Firm game at New Year, there was legitimacy to say that Rangers had a lot of chances, but it was a same old story, and we're obviously going to speak about that story in the lead up to the game this week. For me, the key issue with injuries, Derek, and we've touched upon this a lot in relation to how this squad has been built, because it's been so irregular, because it's not had a sporting director overseeing it for the last 4 seasons up until now. There isn't consistency. You have players like Lawrence and Dowell playing out of position. You have a second half starting at Parkhead where you have Fabio Silva on the left. You have Dujon Sterling playing his 4th different position in an Old Firm game this season alone. You have Tom Lawrence at the base of midfield with Nico Raskin on the bench. And we can argue about whether you think Raskin's good enough, but what you can't argue about, he was someone who was signed last year to be the centre point of that Rangers midfield. That means for me that when these injuries happen, the squad has not been built. It's been built for a very specific style of football, and that style of football ended in October and was succeeded by Clement, who has done well to get the most out of what he has had and the most out of his resources, but it has come off the rails, and you only have to look at what he said last week when he was asked in his press conference, Derek, do you think that there's more work requiring, that the squad requires more work than when you first came in the door? And he said yes, and I would guarantee that is based a lot on what he's seen on the last couple of months as opposed to his first few months in the job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the positives, Johnny, from the game, as I touched on earlier on, three good goals, you've got to say. Fabio Silva netting again, showing good anticipation. Ross McCausland certainly doing his best to stake a claim for a starting spot in the Scottish Cup final. And Todd Cantwell showing what he's capable of. Can you see all three starting on Saturday?
I don't know, Derek. It depends on who's fit, and that's going to be the big question mark, I think, over how this team shapes up against Celtic. Put it this way, I think if everyone is ready to go, I'm not sure Ross McCausland gets in. To me, at the moment where he is a useful squad player, and that's absolutely fine at his age. That's part of his development, and he's doing well to have got to that stage. Given, as Clement said last season, he only played 5 times with the first team, and his contract was being allowed to dwindle down. So you've got to see he's made massive steps, and any player has to go on a journey. It doesn't just immediately click fingers and they're one of the best players in the league. It'll take time. But I think absolutely what he's shown is he can be a really useful player as part of the squad. It can take minutes. If he keeps that enthusiasm up, if he keeps developing his game, I think Ross McCausland can have a really bright future. You saw the goal. That was a moment of sheer quality. And you can't expect him to do that every single game. But give him time, give him patience. I know that's in short supply at Rangers, but that's what young players need fundamentally. And if you give him that, I think he can be a really important player going forward. I think people need to remember back to when it comes to young players, for example, the Walter Smith era, the second time around, there was a lot of young guys on the periphery of the squad who maybe didn't play every single game, but were massively useful in terms of just stepping in when was required and gave quality performances. I know Charlie Adam was a player that caused a lot of the divisiveness about whether or not he was good or not, whether or not he gave enough for the team or not. He scored some important goals. He was definitely a big part of the squad. You think of people like Stephen Smith, who's now obviously...
Oh, Johnny's just froze on us there. He needs to stick 50 pence in the meter. I think that's a lovely image of Johnny mid-flow, but we'll get him back on it soon.
I'll add on about Ross McCausland, Derek, because I was waiting for a chance to jump in there. But I think that McCausland has done really well, and I think it's important he's been criticised at points, but generally, if you look at the Dundee game and the Hearts game, and I know the league's done, how often have I felt you watch Rangers when they've went behind in a game like that, whether it be Dundee at home and the mood, had, as we spoke about at the time, had Rangers went into the dressing room 2-0 down. I think the supporters might have let them know exactly what they thought about it. And then exactly the same away at Hearts, when they're in a difficult position. He's positive in those situations, which I think there's just a lot to be said for the fact that he's positive in those situations. Jonny comes back in. And again, as Jonny was reiterating, he was meant to be, normally when a player like McCausland comes into the youth squad, comes into the first team squad, he'll be behind the first team regular. He'll play 20 to 30 games here or there. He's been thrust in under pressure to be first choice. And again, as Clement said in his post-match press conference, he's had to build up his form again after that tackle in the Motherwell game, which really saw him lost 8 to 10 games of being really at it. Again, as Clement reiterated in his post-match press conference. So for me, he's done enough to show he should be around and be part of things going forward. Do I think he'll be Rangers' first choice right winger next season? No. I think he can hold his head relatively high in comparison to others, and has demonstrated enough, especially in these last 2 games, with his positive forward run and with his ability to, I think, stay pretty focused and not have the baggage that a lot of these Rangers players seem to have when they go behind, to make a positive impact for the team. Don't know if he'll start on Sunday or Saturday, but he's someone who I think has done enough to be a part of things next season.
Yeah, just when you froze there, Jonny, Kev says, Jonny froze like our wing-backs trying to stop a cross. Came in for a bit of criticism. James Tavernier especially, he is not in form at this moment in time. Ridvan, of course, never really covered himself in glory for that second goal either. Could see, incidentally, Robbie Fraser starting the game at Tynecastle, so great to see Clement giving him a chance. But those full-back positions are a concern for Saturday, Jonny. Tavernier... Celtic will look to exploit the Rangers' right-hand side, I'd imagine. Over on the left, Ridvan, you'd like to think would start the game, but defensively hasn't been great in the last couple of games. That is a real weak point for Rangers at this moment in time, is it not?
Derek, I'm pushing Tavernier one up, and I'm putting Dujon Sterling in there at the moment. I think he's a liability. I don't think you shouldn't play him because of the big moments he comes up with, but at the moment, I don't think you can put him up against Dyson Maeda. So as much as I've been advocating for Sterling in the middle, and I do see Sterling playing in the middle as his career winds on for Rangers, I think that's his best position.
Yeah. If
we're talking about the cup final, I don't think you can continue putting Tavernier in there. I think if he does, then Rangers fans will blame the manager when it goes wrong, because it's inevitable it will, given his form at the moment. So that's where I am on it. I just don't think you can trust James Tavernier with the level of form he's shown in the last 10 games to be in that position where he's expected to take care of Celtic's best player in these games. Fundamentally, I know Maeda's got his issues, but I think he's been terrific for Celtic in these games and given Tavernier a really good time, a really hard time. And it kind of looks like Tavernier's almost got a psychological thing where he's terrified because of the pace that Maeda has. I think 3 or 4 years ago, Tavernier was quick enough that he could just about manage with Maeda, but not anymore. I don't think he's got the pace anymore, and he knows that Maeda will torch him. So for me, get Dujon Sterling into that right back row, push Tavernier on. You've still got him. Hopefully he's then freed up to cause some problems. That is if you don't change the shape entirely. If you're talking about a back 5 with Tavernier on the right flank, I'm much more comfortable. But in a back 4, I just think it's asking for problems. And a big part of this, in terms of the way Clement's going to be almost storing up problems for next season, Derek, is that if he continually makes the same mistakes over and over again, people will start to say, how can I see it, a layman, and he can't?
Yeah.
I think we've already seen examples of that, and there's already criticism of the manager out there, and that will only increase. But I think this is an important point. From what I understand, Rangers are absolutely firm in the fact they've got this manager in and he's going to be given time. They will not be doing a manager changeover in November, even if there's significant pressure. This is going to be a guy who's going to get the time to rebuild, and it will be a rebuild. And I think you have to be realistic about what a rebuild looks like. Michael Beale spent all last season telling us, don't worry, when I get my players in, it's all going to be fine. And Michael Beale, I think, would himself admit that was a mistake, because it did take time for these players to bed in, and some of them didn't bed in at all. Some of them did in time. But the idea that it was going to be a panacea when the season started and everything was going to click into place, it was proven to be a nonsense. And it's going to be the same again. If everyone agrees that Rangers needs a massive rebuild, rebuilds don't go like that. Steven Gerrard got 3 years, and I think Rangers are of a mind to give Philippe Clement the time to properly rebuild this club, to properly rebuild this leadership group. If you believe that is needed, then there has to be an understanding and a cognizance that it doesn't just immediately happen. And certainly my understanding is they believe they've got a guy who's won leagues before. He's won them with 2 different clubs. He's managed in the top flight. You'll get time. You don't want Rangers to become seen as kind of like a joke club when it comes to managers. The best example I can give is Hibs at the moment, who have just gone through manager after manager after manager after manager, giving them 10 months at a time. They're in a cycle. One thing that kind of stands out to me is at the moment, Rangers are in a Groundhog Day scenario. Josh wrote about this really eloquently last week or the week before, about how mirror image this is to what was happening under Beale. They can't allow that to continue. You know, appointing a manager in November or October, the season's already over. It's all about the rebuild, but the season where you have all the players of the previous manager goes wrong, and then that manager is tarnished with that brush. It can't continue. This season has to basically be written off. It's not a Clement season. Clement will have learned from it, but first season is next season, essentially, because if you start allowing that hangover to carry in, Rangers are just going to continually be in this cycle of doom. And I think there needs to be a cognizance, and it may be difficult. It's always difficult for fans when things don't go well, that the manager needs a bit of time to get things right. And it's not going to just be a click of the fingers and a turnaround. The one thing I would say is Steven Gerrard, many people were saying when the COVID season shut down, Steven Gerrard should be sacked. Look at his record. He's not done enough. The board need to act. How can you trust them going into this season? There was a lot of fans that were behind him at that point, but there was significant numbers that felt that he'd been given an opportunity and he hadn't delivered. What I would say is, I think Clement needs that level of time and space to get it right.
Yep, lots of interesting points in there. I wanted to take the Tav one because I'm interested in hearing Joshua's views on this. Bill's story with the point says, a tweak is defo needed with the tactics this weekend. Is it a case of either pushing Tavernier one up, Joshua, or changing the shape at the back to make Rangers more hard to beat, I guess, if Celtic look to press and look to harry as they always do?
Honest answer is I don't know, because normally I think if you raise a point like that, playing someone in a position that they're not used to in a cup final and moving Tavernier, I would think no. However, Rangers, what is clear to me, Derek, is that on especially the basis of the last game, Rangers can't do the same thing and expect different results. What do Rangers have to hold on to in Old Firm games? I would argue the only real thing they have to hold on to, even when they've been relatively poor, is that they're normally stronger towards the end of games, which would maybe inform a decision to, okay, be slightly more defensive, maybe go for a back 5, maybe a man mark Celtic all over the pitch. They can't, I think they have to press them really aggressively and cut off their passing options at the top end of the pitch, or they have to maybe go with a back 5 across the defensive line, and as Johnny says, try and mark up on Maida a little bit, because again, to reiterate what everyone watching will know, if Rangers do the same thing, which has been the case over the past few Old Firm games, then I think they're going to achieve the same results. Tavernier, it feels like since before that Celtic game, the 3-3 draw, he's been in bad form. That obviously continued into the weekend. There was a number of times where he lost Vargas, especially in the lead up to that goal. There was one header Vargas had at the back post. Ridvan is coming back from injury and has lost his man at the back post a few times as well. We know that's an area that Celtic are strong in. So you have to, and this is where I have a lot of sympathy with Clement, and want to touch on another point that Johnny made, Derek. He doesn't even know what players he's going to have fit, so it's difficult for him to plan. But I would wager that he needs to do something different, whether it be throwing a curveball in, whether it be going 2 up top. And again, sometimes maybe it's slightly reactionary to say something like that. Rangers have not been good enough, I think, or Rangers have not been close enough overall in Old Firm games to merit the kind of keep going one more time, try this approach one more time, and this time the margins might fall in Rangers' favour, because we've seen that argument, as Johnny was touched upon there, I would argue over successive managers, and Rangers haven't won a big Old Firm game since 2 years ago against Celtic at Hampden. So if you try the same thing in this Old Firm game on Saturday, I think you're probably going to get the same results. But just on Johnny's point about transfer windows, Derek, as well, we've got an interview coming out today and tomorrow with Dave Voss, who is Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's assistant manager over a year at Ibrox. The parallels, I think, and Dave goes into really interesting detail about Gio's backing in the transfer window, recruitment, the squad they inherited, and the difference in style from Gerrard's style to their style. The parallels are totally the same, I would argue now, with Clement's football to Beale's football. Again, we've spoken about it over the past couple of weeks. Look at Celtic's squad over the past 3 years and their style of football. A lot of continuity, especially in the big Old Firm games. Look at Rangers' style. It's went from one to the other and one to the other. So I don't know what Johnny's doing there, so I'm going to take him off the screen. But yeah, keep an eye out for that, because I think there's so many parallels between what Clement has inherited and what Van Bronckhorst inherited, and how Voss reflects on the fact that they felt they needed more windows and better recruitment to fix that. Because at the end of the day, what most people would agree with is it also comes down to quality. Celtic have more quality in their squad. And then in these tight games, in these fine margins, time and time again recently, that quality has won out for them. Yeah,
that's a cracking interview to look forward to, folks, on the website. You can, if you've not subscribed already, do head over to rangersreview.co.uk/subscribe to sign up. Just £4 for 4 months, an absolutely cracking deal. And you can look forward to that, Dave. It should be very interesting stuff from him today and tomorrow. In terms of the transfer front, reports over the weekend, another couple of players Rangers linked with. Now, one such player sort of reported, I think, at the start of last week, if I'm not mistaken, the young teenage South African winger Relebohile Mofokeng, wonderful name, currently plays for Orlando Pirates. Rangers, one of a number of clubs chasing his signature. Red Bull Salzburg, Wolves, and Al Ahly also believed to be in for him. He can play in midfield as well as on the left flank. He scored 4 goals and provided 6 assists for the South African club this season, and Rangers said to be in the driving seat to acquire his signature. Another player that was linked over the weekend with another winger, Ferencvaros Adama Traore, the 28-year-old, believed to be valued at £3.5 million by the Hungarian side. He scored 14 goals in 24 games this season. He has been injured for much of it, so he certainly fits in with the sort of profile Rangers should be looking at. But Johnny, I think I don't know too much about the boys that have been linked, but certainly reducing the age of the squad is something that Philippe Clement is looking to do. I think he addressed it in a recent press conference, bringing in young, hungry guys, not just for energy, I guess, and to provide that bit of vitality in life in what is an aging squad, but also to kickstart what is a player trading model that has stalled in recent seasons. Getting these young lads in, getting like a couple of seasons out of them, and hopefully flipping them on for a profit.
Yeah, absolutely, Derek. That's clearly what Rangers are going to do. They need physicality, they need power, and the way you get that is by bringing in younger players who can provide it. You look at the leadership group that Rangers have: John Lundstrom, wrong side of 30, Connor Goldson, wrong side of 30, James Tavernier, wrong side of 30, Jack Butland, wrong side of 30.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of the problem there. You've got players who are physically on the slide compared to where they were when they first came in. They were young, hungry guys who wanted to succeed. So I think Rangers need to rebuild that leadership group. They need to rebuild that core with guys who have done it before.
Yeah, totally agree. And Joshua, I mean, seem to be young, exciting players, wingers that have been linked to the club. It's we know that Philippe Clement likes to play with wingers on either side. Unfortunately, as you touched on before, he's just not had the personnel to play with out-and-out wide players, but it's something that we can expect next season, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and that's obviously goes back to the squad building issue and the fact that, yes, Rangers have seemed to have, and the noises and all, when you speak to people at the club and those close to the situation, that the recruitment focus has shifted this season. The issue, and I would argue the reason they're still in this situation now is because it hadn't shifted by this time last season, Derek. If you look at the type of players that Rangers are being linked with now compared to last season, there is a real difference in that. If you look at, we had this piece out last week on the injury situation. Only 3 of the 9 players signed last summer have played over 40% of Rangers league minutes. Only 3 of the 7 signed in the summer in January before I've played over 40% of the league minutes as well. There's your issue, is that you've not been able to refresh the spine whatsoever. And the only player that has come, the only 2 players that have come in and really done that role has been Jack Butland and John Souttar in terms of the actual minutes played over the last couple of seasons. So it is clear, as Johnny's alluded to, a lot of change is needed, more change than perhaps Clement initiated or intended to make when he first came into the club. And a lot of that is going to be, I would argue, to make the squad more balanced and not what Clement inherited, which was a squad built for a very specific style of football. Again, that manager was gone in October. Now, since the end of February, I think you're feeling the effects of that, because the last time that Clement was able to start 2 out-and-out wingers before the game against Hearts, and Scott Wright for me isn't a natural out-and-out winger, but the last time he was able to do that was the 2-1 win over Kilmarnock. There's your issue for me. Yes, the mistakes have been made, I think, by Clement in some team selections and key moments in key games. In the last Old Firm game, the approach to me felt all wrong. Yes, there is individual questions for players who have been at this stage far too often and not come out with a league title. You've also got inherited issues that have impacted the injury situation as well, and the squad building issues, which have just limited Clement so much and left him going into an Old Firm game with 9 players out injured, which again, so similar, I think, to the situation that Van Bronckhorst had at Rangers a couple of seasons ago.
Yes. Right, folks, we'll wrap up there. But thank you to each and every one of you for interacting with the show as ever. Big thanks to Jonny and to Joshua as well. Just a heads up for that interview on the website, the Dave Voss interview, so keep your eyes peeled for that. Jonny, you want to jump in there?
I just wanted to say apologies about the technical issues. I'm having a bit of a nightmare today, to say the least. I've got a new webcam that's not playing ball. I realised halfway through that someone had unplugged my wired connection, so I was on Wi-Fi. I was wondering why it wasn't working properly. So yeah, I'll try and be a little bit more professional next time, but unfortunately it's eluded me today.
You soldiered on. So Kev says you need to upgrade your Nokia 5110. So there you go. Right, that'll do us there. Thank you to you all, and enjoy the rest of your Monday, folks. Bye for now.